Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 45, A Kiss is Just a Kiss. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Ray Cyrus is hosting a kissing contest to identify the woman to be the kiss girl on his new album cover. With Fran's help, Maggie is able to join her friends and enter. At the contest, Maggie convinces Fran to enter for a lark. And much to everyone's surprise, Fran wins. Shocked, Maxwell explains that he thought he had considered every possible option. Maggie wins and he's miserable. Maggie loses and she's miserable. But he hadn't considered the wild card possibility that Fran would win, making them all miserable. Unconvinced that Fran won because of her kissing prowess, Fran gives Maxwell a first-hand demonstration of her kissing abilities. Maxwell doesn't want her to be the kiss girl because of his standing in the community, and Fran explains that just because she won, that doesn't mean she's going to do it. She wants to protect Maggie's very fragile self-esteem. Val and Fran go to meet Billy Ray and his soon-to-be ex-manager so that Fran can turn down the gig, despite the possibility of meeting Barbara Streisand. And they learned that the reason that Fran was selected is because the teenagers made Billy Ray look a little long in the tooth, while a woman of Fran's vintage would appeal to a much larger demographic, namely, to quote the ex-manager, older broads. Fran is depressed and starts eating her feelings. When Cece learns the truth, she races to break the news to Maxwell, who, instead of finding Fran repulsive, goes to comfort her, but only after Cece's attempt to kiss him resulted in her kissing Niles instead, much to her and Niles' chagrin. Fran thanks Maxwell for making her feel so much better with a kiss on his forehead, much to his disappointment. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, that was a great summary, Debbie.
Thank you very much. Would you like to take us to the kitchen?
Yes, so we open this episode in the kitchen. Brighton, Maggie, and Gracie are at the table. Val and Fran are kind of at the counter. And Maggie's flipping through a magazine and notes that Billy Ray Cyrus is holding a kissing contest to find the kissing girl on his new album. And that we then learn that, back in the day, there was a cowboy bar in Flushings that Fran and Val would go to. Mm-hmm. Fran notes that she's not just rock and roll, she's a little bit country.
Yep.
And that there was a mechanical bull at that cowboy bar that she used to ride. She also notes that if Billy Ray Cyrus was Jewish, she would...
That wasn't Billy Ray. That was a reference to the mechanical bull.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because Fran says that there was a mechanical bull there that she used to ride all the time. And then she says to Val, not to the kids, like in a snide, like a side, like snarky comment, I'm telling you, if he were Jewish, I would have married him, which is one of those comments that we wouldn't have understood as children watching the show. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Continue.
Well, I didn't even catch that this time, so.
Okay, sorry to ruin your naivete. Did not mean to do that.
So Maggie's talking about, like all the girls, all of her friends are going to do it, but, she's worried about Pamela Chapman. She's so pretty that even her mother hates her.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, oh, don't let those overdeveloped girls, get you down. They peak in high school. And Val starts saying, yeah, don't you remember that girl in our class who was so beautiful and popular? Everyone thought she would own the world. But then she got dumped by her fiance and she was fired from her job. And then she started becoming a nan. Oh,
exactly.
Again, she's talking about Fran.
Mm-hmm.
But again, in terms of the whole kissing thing, Fran's talking about like back in the day, she and Jerry Schwartz, were doing the tongue wrestling throughout the Blue Lagoon. And Gracie's like, you mean thumb wrestling? And Fran's like, yes. Yeah, thanks for correcting me.
Exactly.
So it's a very brief kind of opening scene this time around. But basically what we've set up is that there's that kissing contest. Do you have anything to add to that opening scene, Debbie?
I do not.
Okay. Can you take us still to the kitchen? But
exactly. I would be happy to keep us in the kitchen. So Maggie, Maggie clearly is thinking about the contest, and she wants to know, like, why am I doing this? I don't have a chance of winning. And Fran tries to, like, boost her confidence by saying, you can do it with your eyes closed, although actually you do it with your eyes open. And Maggie does not like that, because it's apparent that Fran has been spying on her when she and Sean have been making out. And Fran tries to draw a distinction between spying and living vicariously, and explain that those are two very different things. And she's sort of saved by the bell, except it's the door. And Sean comes in. Sean's there at the door, and Maggie goes to get him. And Niles asks the question that I think everyone's wondering: Sean, what happened to Peter? And Fran explains that Peter has a bad haircut. He'll be back in a couple weeks. Actually, I should also mention, before Sean arrived, Maggie was like, how am I gonna tell Sean I'm gonna enter this kissing contest? Like, how do I do that? And Fran tells her to be subtle. Well, Maggie's not great at the subtlety, although in fairness, neither is Fran. As I think we all have acknowledged by this point in the series. And so Maggie's attempt at subtlety is, a kissing contest, like holding the magazine, like she hadn't seen it before. Exactly. And Sean's response is, let's enter, and he kisses her. And, so they talk a little bit about it. And, I think Fran kind of indicates to Maggie, like, that she should tell her father, like they should continue talking about it. But then Maxwell comes in, and Fran does something. I think she's done this in a previous episode, where she goes something like, whoa, wrong red alert or something.
Yeah, I had wrong red alert.
Yeah. Sorry, I feel sort of even silly trying to imitate her, as evidenced by my failed attempt. But so anyway, Maxwell comes in, and by this point, Maggie is over by the refrigerator. Her new boyfriend is sitting at the table with his back to the door to the dining room, which is from where Maxwell comes. And Maxwell just sees a shoulder length, blonde, bobbed haired person sitting at the table, and he assumes it's Maggie. And so he kisses the back of the boyfriend's head. Hello, darling. How's my little girl? And then he takes a couple steps. Everyone's just sort of confused. And then he looks over and he sees Maggie. He's like, oh, Margaret. And then he tries to, I guess, bond with the boyfriend or cover up his mistake. It's sort of unclear. He's just trying to get away from what he just did. And he talks to the boyfriend. It's Peter, right? And Maggie's like, Sean, daddy. And Maxwell is like, oh, yes, Sean, of course. In England, Peter is short for Sean, which is one of the many reasons why I left.
Yeah.
I think I referenced this line a few weeks ago when we saw The Last Boyfriend. So anyway, needed to point that out. And so Fran tries to show Maggie how to be subtle. Speaking of England, does everyone know that Billy Ray Cyrus is holding a kissing contest to see what girl is going to be on the cover of his latest CD? And she, also has the magazine. This is her version of subtlety. And Maxwell comments that it's not a bad ruse to get hundreds of girls to pucker up. And the boyfriend's like, think about it. All those girls lining up, dying to kiss you. And Brighton has come back into this, I think he had left at one point, and now he's back, and he walks up and he says, man, when I'm in that situation, I pick out the prettiest girl. I take her home. She puts on something sexy. And then I wake up and Niles makes me a really big bowl of Captain Crunch. And again, he's what, 12, 13?
Yeah.
And so Fran uses her subtlety again. Speaking of Captain Crunch, I guess it's no problem if Maggie enters the contest. And needless to say, Maxwell and Sean both object. Sean says, Maggie, I'm not letting you do this. And Maggie stands up for herself. Sean, you can't tell me what to do. You don't own me. Well, Maxwell says, absolutely right. I do. No contest. And, Fran tells Maggie, it's over. Take the Dutch boy, go on, get out of here. And Maggie, not so quietly, says, okay, you're going to work on him. And Maxwell's like, oh, so you're going to work on me, And Fran's like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to work on you. In fact, I happen to agree with you. You saw how upset Sean got. He can't stand the thought of her kissing someone else. If she enters the contest, that could bust those two kids right up. And like, I'm going to pause here. They're doing some really good blocking with their movements, you know, because Maxwell's turned his back and Fran like kind of takes steps towards him, like following him, leaning forward. And then when he turns around, she like quickly turns back to the table to like grab stuff off the table. She's playing with him. She's working on him, and it's very effective. She adds, "You'd never see Sean again." And he like changes his mind. It's fine. Perhaps you're being too harsh on Margaret. After all of her friends are going to be doing it. And she's like, "Oh, all right." And like she looks at her watch. Like it took her no time to get him to flip.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
The only thing I wanted to add was, did you catch what Maxwell said after Fran says "wrong red alert"?
Oh, mating season in Queens, Miss Fine.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because in my notes, I all I put was mating season in Queens ? But I didn't try to put in the wrong red alert. Anyway, but good point. Thank you. Would you like to take us to the next scene?
Yes. So we are now in the record store, and Maggie and Fran are waiting in line, and Fran comments in terms of waiting in line that, this reminds her when she was living back home, there's only one bathroom. So anytime her dad, went in, they had to wait. I think she said something along the lines of like, until Murder, She Wrote. I don't know if you caught specifically what she said, but essentially she was used to waiting in line with that one bathroom. Maggie is unsure of herself. She's looking around, all the girls are so sexy, and Fran's trying to like boost her confidence and say like, "Oh, but you've still got something that they all don't have. You still got it, right?" Again, as a child, we would not know necessarily what she's referring to.
Correct.
And then Maggie points out Pamela Chapman in line. And Fran looks at her and she's like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know Brad Pitt and Claudia Schiffer had a kid together."
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's Maggie's turn. She's unsure. Fran encourages her to go. Then Fran, once Maggie's gone for her, her turn, Fran goes back towards Pamela. And she introduces herself as someone from Humana Records.
Yep.
And she says, "Oh, you don't have to stay in line. You've made the cut." And Pamela immediately believes this, like, "Oh, really?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, even takes out a little pad of paper and pen, to write down where she needs to go. And Fran's like, you should go to 1313 Mockingbird Lane and ask for either Lily or Herman.
Correct.
And again, Pamela is obviously oblivious to the reference.
Correct.
Does not pick up that this is another Addams Family.
No, this one's the Munsters.
I knew it. Sorry. I was saying it's it's the Munsters. Anyway.
It's fine. We're all good.
I second guessed myself on it. Anyway. So, but Pamela's like buying into it and she leaves. And then Fran kind of is walking back to the front of the line, sees another pretty girl and starts saying, "I'm from Humana." But at this point, Maggie's done and Maggie's kind of like just very happy. That was so cool. And then she tells Fran that Fran should do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fun. And,
yep.
Fran's like, "Oh, no." But, like Maggie's so enthusiastic. And then she goes, "Do it, Fran." And so Fran goes. And unless you have something to add to that scene, why don't you pick up?
Yeah. So I just want to mention in the conversation between Maggie and Fran, Maggie tells her to go for it for a goof. And Fran's like, no, I came here for you. I'm not going to march myself up to Billy Ray Cyrus, throw my arms around him and suck those farm boy lips right off him. I wouldn't know where to begin.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when Maggie says it's really fun. And Fran's like, well, it's fun for you to kiss a celebrity, but I get kissed. And clearly the end of her sentence is going to be all the time. But then she realizes that that's not the case. And then she says, out of my way. And that's when Maggie says, go for it, Fran. And then in scene 4, how could you do it, Fran? And Fran's like, you told me to go for it. But I didn't tell you to win, Maggie responds. And Fran's like, I'm sorry, my mouth has a mind of its own. There's no stopping it. And Maxwell, like they've walked into the house at this point. Maxwell was playing chess with Brighton in the living room. And he makes a snarky comment about how no truer words have ever been spoken. Maggie's very upset that, by tomorrow, everyone in school is going to know that she was beaten out in a kissing contest by her nanny. And, she kind of runs off in very Maggie fashion. And Brighton I think Brighton leaves. And it just leaves Fran and Maxwell. And he's just totally dismissive of her experience. Like he makes comments to her like, you don't seriously think that you won, do you? You don't think you could have won based on your kissing prowess. He says to her, they were looking for a beautiful teenager, and as lovely as you are, you're not exactly a teenager. And she, of course, she stands up for herself, which is something that she does a really good job of throughout the series. And she explains that she beat them because I happen to be a fabulous kisser. And he's like, Miss Fine, this is insanity. There's absolutely no way you could have won that contest legitimately. And during their conversation, they've been walking back and forth, right? Like they were in the living room and then they were in the foyer, then they were back in the living room. And by the time they get to the point of, oh yeah, well, you asked for it, Buster, she says to him. He's like in front of the chair by itself in the living room. And she basically like pushes him down, jumps on top of him, and kisses him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add anything to the scene, or would you like to pick up where the scene leaves off?
I will pick up where the scene leaves off. So
Good
Fran
choice.
is still kissing Maxwell on the chair. And then she finally gets up and she's like, I'm sorry I had to get so tough with you, but you had to learn. She's like standing up and Maxwell's still on the chair, like kind of just dazed.
Exactly.
You can kind of see some of like the lipstick like on him.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of walk over to the mirror where
she's fixing her lipstick.
Yes. And Maxwell kind of follows after he's done being dazed on the chair. And that's when he tells her, he had thought of all the different situations, that, if Maggie wins, he would be miserable. If Maggie loses, Maggie would be miserable. But the wild card is, Fran winning and they're all miserable.
Exactly.
And again, they start, I don't have down specifically how they get back into the kiss.
Yeah, so Fran says, if you're so miserable, how do I know you had clams casino and a side salad for lunch? Cappuccino and a bite of creme brulee? I thought you were off the sweets.
Yeah, decaf cappuccino.
Thank you.
And at that point, after she says that, Maxwell kind of turns and like does that thing where he like breathes into his hands to sniff, like get bad breath. And he, starts saying that, that he has a position in the community and he can't have his nanny, doing this. And she's like, is that what you think of me? Like, is that what I am to you? The nanny? And he's like, yes. And she's like, all right, you caught me in a technicality.
Exactly.
But, she explains that just because she won doesn't mean that she would actually do it. And he seems confused by it. And she's like, oh, you're such a man. And she's again explaining that she has no intention of doing it because his daughter has such low self-esteem. She doesn't want to harm that anyway. Maxwell says that he wishes he was in a pub with his hands around a tall lager. And that's Lager. Fran interprets it as Logger, and she kind of has this like look on her face.
Correct.
And and then she kind of turns, asks Maxwell, have you told your children that you're considering living an alternate lifestyle? And of course Maxwell's frustrated. It's a beer, Miss Fine. And she's like, well, speak English. And again, he's like, so what are you talking about? You're not doing it, or something like that. She basically says, well, I don't know, like I still can't get the picture of you picking up Paul Bunyan in a bar out of my head. And she kind of goes off, and Maxwell notes that it might be just easier to have his children raised by wolves.
Correct.
Is there anything you want to add to that scene?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Can you take us back to the record store?
I'd love to. So Fran goes back to the record store, but this time she's not with Maggie. Instead, she's with Val. And tell me if you disagree, but I feel like this is a time where we should talk about Val's outfit in the scene because she talks about it. Okay. So she comments, so Val is wearing what I in my notes have referred to as her Western ensemble. She has a red skirt that goes a little bit above her knee. It's kind of puffy. It has white on it. And then over it, she has a white blouse and a blue vest, and she has a red bow, and it looks totally Western. I mean, can you think of a better way to describe it?
No.
Okay. If anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, please either watch the episode or Google it, because it will come up in the image results for The Nanny, A Kiss is Just a Kiss. Anyway, but the reason I mentioned that we should talk about it here is because she asks Fran if she went overboard with her ensemble, and Fran's the obvious answer is yes. But Fran says, no, you look like just like when my temple did the best little whorehouse in Texas. And so then they're talking about Billy Ray and how attractive he is, and I think Val comes up with the comparison that I wonder if he's related to Sugar Ray Leonard, because they both have Ray in their name. Anyway, so their conversation is sort of interrupted by Billy Ray Cyrus coming in with who we find out is his current, soon-to-be ex-agent. And they greet each other, and the agent says, she's perfect, Billy Ray, and Fran's very excited, like, oh, Mr. Cyrus, if Emily Bronte married you, her name would be Bronte Cyrus. And she thinks it's funny. I think that's funny. Billy Ray Cyrus did not find that funny. But so anyway, so they cross the room, they're talking, and Fran says, as flattered as I am that you picked me to be your kiss girl, I can't be on your album cover. And Billy Ray and the agent and the manager are confused. You don't want to be in my new video? No. You don't want to be the kiss girl on my European tour? No. How about tickets to the Grammys? There's a party at Streisand's afterwards. And that one makes Fran pause, and she pulls Val aside. What are we really talking about? She's an heiress. She has toothpicks for thighs. No. And she's like, I can't do it. And the manager says, you look great with Billy Ray. Those teenagers made him look a little long in the tooth. And obviously that's not what any person wants to hear as to why they were selected for something, particularly not a woman of a certain age. And Billy Ray steps in. What my ex-manager was trying to say is, kissing you will appeal to a larger group. And again, the manager can't help himself. Yeah, older broads, he says. And Billy Ray looks at him like, was I drunk when I hired you? And the question becomes what are you going to walk away with nothing? And Fran says, no, I'm going to walk out knowing that I didn't destroy the self-esteem of a beautiful young heiress. And that's all I need. And then she grabs the cutout of Billy Ray and says to Val, come on, Val, help me carry this on the bus.
Yeah. And so what I actually had in my notes was that she would appeal to a much broader audience. And then the manager says older broads. So a play on words.
Yes.
With that. But yeah.
I guess, unless this is what you're going to add to the scene, I should have mentioned before, when they first came into the record store, Val wants to take a picture with the cutout of Billy Ray Cyrus, and Fran's comment to her is, look lifelike, or something like that. Anyway, sorry. Is there anything you want to add, or do you want to?
No.
Okay.
No. So the next scene, we're in the kitchen. Niles walks in, and we see that the refrigerator doors open. And Niles is like, oh, I told the kids they should close the refrigerator door. So he goes to close it. But we find that actually Fran's sitting, like literally sitting, was it a stool or a chair, like in the open refrigerator,
Correct.
eat a turkey leg.
Yep.
And so she's also, I believe, in a robe.
Yes.
And so then, it comes out like the whole thing about she learned, she's depressed after finding out the reason they chose her. And, Niles in a way is like, oh, don't feel too bad. What do you look like? 32, 34? And Fran's like, well, if you're not talking about my bra size, you're not helping.
Well, so he says, what are you? Not like how he, anyway, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, looking like age-wise.
Yeah, not like how do you look, but like how old are you? Like,
yeah,
not a big deal
32,
to him.
You look great. What are you, 32, 34?
Right.
So Maggie comes in and she's kind of talking to she's apologizing for how she behaved earlier. And during this, time, Fran puts the turkey leg in the pocket of her robe at some point.
Yes, she does, which is an interesting storage.
Yes. But Fran is like, oh, she explains to Maggie, well, it turns out that, I'm of the age where I can make a liver spot look like a coffee stain or something like that. And so she's telling Maggie, oh, your only problem is you're too beautiful. That's your only curse. And so Maggie hugs her, I love you, that kind of stuff. They have a nice moment. And then she pulls out and says, oh, and I heard that, at least it wasn't Pamela Chapman who got it. Apparently, she was sent by a lady on a wild goose chase. And Fran's kind of like a little nervous, like, did they say what, who's the lady? Did they look at the lady? Did they see who it was? Oh, it was just some older lady, which again is like another arrow at Fran, given the whole age thing. So my notes got a little bit hazy, but I think at this point Maggie leaves. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Maggie leaves.
And it's just like Fran and Niles. And Fran's kind of lamenting, like, in 5 years, her tush train.
Yeah, so she says, do you know what the worst part of it all is? And before Niles could say anything, she says, not that in 5 years my tush is going to need training meals.
Mm-hmm.
And then she continues with where I think you were going.
Well, that's where I was saying it. But basically Mr. Sheffield was right.
Correct.
It was so far-fetched. And I think Niles, does Niles say far-fetched?
Yeah, so Fran says,
a little far-fetched.
So Fran says, where do I come off thinking I can compete with young girls? And Niles says, well, it was a little far-fetched. And then Fran,
and she says, Niles, and says, I don't need your 2 cents. But then the side doorbell, there's a knock or a ring. And she's like, but I will need a 20. And actually Niles does pull out like a 20 to give to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, you're ordering pizza? Like, we're eating in an hour. And she's like, yeah, I know. That's why I ordered thin crust.
Yeah.
So she gives the money to the pizza delivery guy, takes the box, and then in walks Cece. And Fran goes, oh, hi, Miss Babcock. And then she goes up the back staircase upstairs, and Cece can tell something's off, right?
Yeah, because the way Fran says, hi, Miss Babcock, it's just like so sad and pathetic.
Yes. And so as soon as she's gone, Cece, it turns to Niles. Niles is kind of, he sprayed some solution on the counters, like wiping it with a very large sponge. And Cece's on the other side of the counter, like, tell me. And Niles kind of like doesn't respond, and she's like, oh, come on, Niles, say it, or tell me, or I'll just die. And he goes, you say it, but you don't mean it.
Right.
And so, but she's still, asking, and he's like, well, why would I tell you that, that she was chosen because of she was older, because somehow in your sick, twisted mind, you're going to go tell Mr. Sheffield because you think it makes you look more appealing. And she's just like acting innocent, like, oh no, like, but then she starts to whistle, slowly walking out, and then she starts to run, and Niles gives chase. And I don't know how you counted this. Did you count this as the scene ending or continuing?
You can continue if you'd like, but only if you comment on their race compared to the last race we saw, which was between Cece and Fran. With the slow motion.
Yeah. There wasn't so much slow motion, I don't think.
There was no slow motion.
They were going at it. Bumping down the thing to the point where they both get to Maxwell's office door at the same time. And so they're kind of doing that thing where they're both wedged into the door frame. And finally, Cece breaks free and giddily tells Maxwell.
She shouts it.
Nanny finds old. Like, really old. And, this time Niles is in there as well. And, she's saying, they picked her because she's old. And again, I don't know order, but is this where...
Do you want me to...
I don't want to... Yeah, I don't want to head, but it's really old like her. But Maxwell says, what? Does she look like... What is she, like 29, 30?
Right, but even before that, he says, that's preposterous.
What is she, like 29, 30? And then Cece's like, oh, please, to what power? And, she could be... And then Niles interjects.
So what Cece says is, do we really know how old she is under all that makeup? And Niles then says, she could be close to your age. And Cece says, that's right. She could be close to... Forget it, Niles.
Yes.
I'll let you pick up. Sorry.
Yes. So basically, again, she's kind of shot herself in her own foot.
Yep.
But she's going on and on again about how good of a kisser could she be? Kissing is an art. And we have to kind of know that at this point, she had been looking away. When she was there, like if you're looking at the screen, she's on the left, Maxwell was on the right, and Niles was there as well. She had kind of turned away from Maxwell, so she's facing more towards where the office desk is. And she's saying about how kissing is an art. Well, at this point, while she's talking about that, Maxwell kind of drifts off to the back corner of the office and seems to be looking at something. And Niles has kind of gotten into the spot Maxwell was.
Yep.
And she mentions, kissing is an art, and, the best is when it's spontaneous. And she whirls around, grabs Niles, and kisses him. But then, of course, she realizes what happened.
Yep.
And she is like, her eyes are just so wide, horrified. And Niles, in his Niles way, was like, was it as bad for you as it was for me? And Cece just like remains frozen with like her hands kind of up, her eyes wide in horror. And then, so at this point though, like Maxwell's kind of oblivious to what has happened because he was looking at something in the back corner. And he leaves, and she finally kind of unfreezes and go, no, wait, come back. And then we see Niles like back by the desk gargling water, and she whirls at him and says, you set me up, didn't you? And he did, obviously. And because she's like, goes through what happened, that the race, the
chase, getting stuck in the door, everything.
You set me up. My mental health is just a sick game to you. And he's like, I didn't write it down, but basically like, yes.
Rack them up, let's play again.
Exactly. So yeah. Do you want to add anything to that scene?
I just want to emphasize the look of, as you put it, horror and the like frozen, like, I don't want to say like deer caught in headlights look that Cece had, more like mouse terrified about to die look that she had after she discovered it was Niles, because it's just priceless.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's like she stays there for a good long while.
Uh-huh. And like Niles has moved on to go like gargle. Maxwell's totally oblivious, and she's just like frozen in just utter horror.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So do you want to take us to Fran's room?
I would love to. So, Maxwell had said in the last scene, "Oh, poor Miss Fine. I was so insensitive to her. Maybe I should see if she's all right." And he like walked out to go. And so he knocks on the door. Meanwhile, Fran is sitting on her bed, still in her yellow bathrobe, and she has the pizza box open next to her, and she was eating the pizza. And he knocks, and she says, "Oh, don't come in. I'm not dressed." She quickly closes the pizza box and covers it with a blanket. And then she lowers herself a little bit in the bed, and she says, "Come in."
Mm-hmm.
And, Maxwell comes in, and he's like, "Miss Fine, I do hope you'll be coming down to dinner." And she's like, he's like, "I can't have my favorite nanny wasting away." And she's like, "Oh, I don't think I can eat." And he's like, "Do I smell pizza?" And she's like, "No, that's Glade's new Italian fresh scent." And as it turns out, so Maxwell explains to her that the reason he's there is that he couldn't stand the thought of her feeling badly about herself. And she says to him that there's nothing he could do or say that's going to make her feel better. It's bad. And so he tries anyway. And he says, "Well, I guess I'd be wasting my breath if I said that no girl could possibly be a match for a woman like you." And he also says things like, "Why are you Americans so obsessed with youth? I prefer the European sensibility. People are like wine. We get better with age, especially if that fine wine is robust and earthy and yet strangely compelling." And like, sweet, thank you. And he also says things like, "One more thing before I stop wasting my breath. I think you're one heck of a kisser." And he explains to her that every time like he says something, she says, "Oh, stop," or like, you're wasting your time. Like, "Oh, stop. I can't listen anymore." But then continue. So she like,
yeah, go on.
Exactly. She keeps, stop. No, keep going. And so he explains that he can't remember being kissed like that. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever been kissed like that before. "Oh, like what?" "Well, with such passion, such abandon, such suction."
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, "Well, Danny used to call me his little dirt devil." And he's like, "Really? Isn't that charming?" And, Fran at this point, I think says, "You are just so wonderful. Here I was eating my heart out, and you come up and make me feel, so much better. You're such a doll. I could just," and he's like, "Just what?" And he gets this look on his face. Like, we all know what he's thinking. We all know what he's hoping.
Anticipation.
He's hoping that she's going to answer the way she does. "Kiss you," is what she says. And so he takes his little glasses off, and he's like, "Well, far be it from me to refuse a token of gratitude from a lady." And she grabs him, leans over, and kisses his forehead. And he looks so disappointed, as I think the whole audience was disappointed. And she's very happy, and she, leans back, puts her arms up over her head, and says, "It's nice to know I still got it."
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add anything?
Nope, you got it.
Okay, would you like to continue?
Well, I didn't see. Did you see end credit?
No, I didn't.
I didn't. So, but yeah. So, I just wanted to say before we got into the shticks that this episode felt really quick, and I think part of it is that there's no secondary like plot line, right?
Right.
Like typically we have a secondary plot line. This one, again, it's just this whole kissing contest kind of through line throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that added to how quickly it felt for me personally. I don't know if you noticed if it felt quicker to you or not.
I don't know if it was just me, but I felt like they were delivering their lines much faster than usual, which is why my notes are not as comprehensive as I'd like them to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it felt like a pretty quick episode to me. I'm sure you're well aware of what I'm going to say instead of in terms of the plot.
You didn't like it.
The whole concept of the kissing contest for teenagers with Billy Ray Cyrus was just like super gross to me. Because what was this? Did this air in 94 or 95?
I think 94, but I'm not sure.
So like he was already a father.
Yeah,
at this point.
it was 1995. I'm sorry. I was just
Yeah.
wondering
So
how
like,
old he was when this aired.
so I'm pretty sure Miley was born like 92. So like, and there's older kids as well. So like, ugh.
He would have been like 34, 33, 34, since he was born in
Yeah. And that
1961.
they're like, yeah, and that they're like targeting teenagers for it. I don't know if that disturbed you or not, but for me, I was just like, oh, I'm glad at least they didn't show like Maggie going off for her turn. Like, I mean, like didn't show her kissing him.
Mhm.
But she's still like 15 or maybe
She's
16.
15. She's not 16 yet because we haven't had her sweet 16.
Okay, so she's 15, and I'm just like, wow.
Okay. Yeah, I should have known you were going to say that. I guess I just focus so much on Fred and Maxwell kissing that I don't care about the rest.
Yeah, no, that's just I had to say it. I was
That's
just
fine.
like, yeah. I mean, there's some memorable kisses that we actually see, that being Fran and Maxwell, and then Cece and Niles.
Yep.
I was not expecting Cece and Niles.
Yep.
But I just like the whole premise of it was just like, what? Because again, especially whenever the soon-to-be ex-manager's talking about how you don't want to be like the cover for it, you don't want to be on the like European tour, like in the video and all this. Like, were they expecting to offer this to a teenager? Like, I don't know. But anyway,
Fair. That's fine. I should have known you were going to say that. Again, I was just so focused on Fran and Maxwell kissing.
mhm.
I'll take this as an opportunity to say we're up to kiss count 4.
Yes.
I'm not counting her kissing his forehead as an additional kiss. I hope that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's just my 2 cents that people might not care about. But I was just like taken aback because I actually even rewound it whenever to make sure I heard correctly that it was a kissing contest, not just like a contest to be on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that might also be filed under 90s nostalgia because I feel like I've never actually seen or heard in real life of like any kind of kissing contest. Have you?
That was actually going to be my question for you. Have you ever?
Nope.
Because I haven't either. Yeah. Wonderful listeners, let us know if you've ever actually heard of a real kissing contest in real life, or if this is a totally, Hollywood created concept. It sort of feels like a Hollywood created concept, doesn't it?
To some extent, yeah. I've only ever seen it in like movies.
Exactly.
And not even that recent,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So anyway, did you have anything kind of like overarching that you wanted to talk about before we got into the shticks?
I'll just continue focusing on the fact that Fran and Maxwell kissed, and it clearly floored him. And that makes me happy. So that's all I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to talk about favorite fashion?
So favorite fashion. So I did note that the bathrobe we see Fran wearing is the same yellow with white daisies that we saw last week.
That's a very good point.
Like it's like one of the, because she has obviously a whole array of different types of robes that we've seen throughout like the almost 2 full seasons we've watched at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So she has options. So it's just interesting. Like we see it in such quick succession.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anything in particular you wanted to discuss in terms of the fashion? I know you already talked about Val's like kind of stereotypical outfit.
Yeah, I'll say I didn't particularly care for Val's outfit, in case that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't obvious. I guess I want to talk about what Fran wore to the actual kissing contest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a short black skirt, and then it's a patterned blouse, patterned jacket with a matching blouse. So it's a black base with red and pink and green. I think they're cherries or maybe they're flowers. I wouldn't wear it, but I think she looks fantastic in it. And then on the other hand, when she and Val go to the record store, when they go to turn Billy Ray Cyrus down, she's wearing like what looks like either a black skirt or like black shorts with like a orange checkered pattern jacket blouse over it. I don't particularly care for that outfit.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and then again for the rest of the episode, she's in her bathrobe.
yes.
So, the only thing I would also know, and it kind of ties into the 90s nostalgia, is like Maggie's outfits seem very nice to me.
Yes, I had that too.
Yeah. Again, like the dress was kind of that velvety kind of fabric, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's like a light green, like a mint green.
Mm-hmm. And like I feel like there's like a shirt or something underneath it.
A white t-shirt, yeah.
Which seems to be again kind of a very 90s kind of style.
Mm-hmm. It's a pattern of Maggie's attire that we've seen previously, and I think we'll continue to see.
Mm-hmm.
So,
anything else you wanted to talk about fashion-wise?
That's all I got. How about you?
That's all I've got. So, notable New Yorkers. I did want to mention the title of the episode before we go on. A Kiss is Just a Kiss. That made me think of the song As Time Goes By in like Casablanca. I don't know.
That's an excellent catch.
Yeah, that's what, because those are lyrics within the song As Time Goes By.
Correct.
So I didn't know if that's intentional or not, but that's the kind of reference I immediately got from it.
I wish I had drawn that conclusion because that's an excellent catch.
Well, right. Thank you.
that is one of the lyrics in As Time Goes By.
Mm-hmm.
I did not pick up on that, but you're right.
Yeah, and then obviously Billy Ray Cyrus is mentioned right off the bat.
Yep.
I think back in the day, he was most well known for the song My Achy Breaky Heart. Obviously, since then, he did Hannah Montana with his daughter, Miley Cyrus. Has done other things as well. Did the remix for Old Town Road. So,
yeah, according to his Wikipedia, since 1992, he has released 16 studio albums, 53 singles. So,
yeah. So, but again, I think back in the day, it was much more the country kind of thing. That's how Fran and Val knew him from.
The country bar?
No, like just singing country.
Right, yeah. I meant their time hanging out at the country bar in Flushing.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think we've talked about the movie The Blue Lagoon before. Have we not?
We have, yes. Yes, I believe we have.
Okay, so that's referenced again in that opening scene when she's tongue wrestling, actually thumb wrestling with Jerry Schwartz.
Right.
And then Judge Ito, did you catch that?
So that one, maybe that's, okay. That makes more sense because I thought she said George Ito, and I kept finding a reference to a cartoon that I was unfamiliar with. But George Ito is clearly what she said.
I thought Judge Ito.
You are clearly right. Okay. According to our friends at Wikipedia, Judge Lance Allen Ito is now a retired American judge who is best known for presiding over the O.J. Simpson trial. back in 1995.
Oh,
So that was clearly the correct reference, not George Ito.
okay. Good to know. Captain Crunch, a cereal that
Yep.
we know. Oz. Now,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No,
I
you go ahead.
assumed it was a reference to the Wizard of Oz and how the
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz was, made decisions. And once he spoke, that was the end of things, typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that was my go-to. But I didn't know whenever like yeah, okay, yeah. I didn't know if Dr. Oz was like a personality back then, but I think it's the Wizard of Oz.
Let's stick with that.
Yeah. I did want to say, looking at that particular scene with Sean, that before that whole confusion with like Maxwell thinking that he's Maggie, I was thinking to myself, wow, his haircut looks a lot like Maggie's. I don't know if you had that same reaction as well.
Yeah.
But I was like, then I was like, oh, okay, the show is acknowledging this as well.
Yes, it was clearly intentional. Do you know what the reference to the Dutch boy was?
I didn't know if it was a specific reference, so no.
So the Dutch boy was a reference to Dutch Boy Group, which was a paint manufacturer from Cleveland, Ohio, whose logo featured a long-haired blonde boy. That's from our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. I believe we've also talked about Murder, She Wrote before.
Yes.
Okay. We've talked about Brad Pitt.
Yep.
And maybe even Claudia Schiffer. Have we?
Don't think we've talked about Claudia Schiffer since I didn't know or remember who she was.
Okay.
Sorry, Claudia Schiffer, if you are a listener, please let us know and I'll apologize to you personally.
Yeah, go ahead.
She's a German actress and supermodel who became very, very successful in the 1990s. That's also according to our friends at Wikipedia.
We already talked about 1313 Mockingbird Lane and Lily or Herman.
Yep.
Referring to the Munsters. Finally. Like I said, I've just had so much self-doubt since last week.
Sorry.
And let's see. Do you have any you want to?
Sure. Paul Bunyan,
yes.
And I quote, "A giant lumberjack and folk hero in American and Canadian folklore," end quote. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Fran also references The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, which was both a Broadway musical and a musical comedy film that involved, I guess, the relationship between a sheriff and a madam who ran the local brothel. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Sugar Ray Leonard, American boxer, actor, and motivational speaker, who was competing at the time that this episode aired. Emily Bronte, she was an English novelist who is best known for her novel Wuthering Heights. Her sisters were both Charlotte and Anne Bronte. And then
she also had a brother.
Who was her brother?
What was his name? Brand. It started with a B. Brand. I took like
Branwell.
a class.
Was it Branwell? Okay.
Yes.
That's according to our friends at Google.
Yes, he did paintings, I think.
Yes, according to Wikipedia, he was an English painter and writer.
So quite the artistic family.
Apparently. I was familiar with sisters. I didn't know the brother existed, despite my English lit classes.
I mean, I took a class specifically on the Brontes. So that explains that.
Fair. And then I think I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, there is another Streisand reference that you pointed out in terms of the party after the Grammys.
Yes.
So, like, I don't even know how many times at this point there's been a Barbra Streisand reference.
In almost it's like every episode.
There's like has to be some type of And I'm trying to see. I think we're pretty much. I think I'm out. Aside from Glade being when she says it's Glade's new Italian fresh scent
Right.
for the pizza smell. But yeah, I'm
There weren't as many in this episode as there often are.
yeah. And again, it just felt very not streamlined, maybe. I don't know.
It
seemed
moved quickly.
Yes, indeed. So Yiddishakop.
So I'm going to start with an easy one, which is the word tush. It's short for tuchus, which means your rear end, your bottom, your butt. Pick your word. Anyway, and then the other, obviously, Clam's Casino that Maxwell ate and Fran tasted when she kissed him would not be kosher because clams are not kosher. Also, it was weird to me that she had the big turkey leg and then she was taking it with the box of pizza, like the pizza box, to her room because you wouldn't mix turkey with pizza. Pizza has cheese is dairy, turkey is meat. Typically you wouldn't mix meat and dairy in that fashion, which is also kind of interesting because like Talmudically, like what the Torah actually says, it applies to mixing like dairy with like beef. So like you're not supposed to, the prohibition comes from, you're not supposed to cook a baby in its mother's milk. Turkeys don't lactate. So, but Jews still don't, Jews who keep kosher still do not mix meat and dairy, even if it's, poultry, because that's a rabbinic prophylactic protection of the Talmudic rule. So basically, like, we're going to put this big, protection around the actual prohibition to prevent you from accidentally straying and violating the more serious prohibition. Yeah. Also, if she were to be keeping kosher, she would not go from like eating a turkey leg to eating cheese. Depending on which form of Judaism you follow or where your family comes from, there are different rules for the amount of time you need to wait between eating meat and eating dairy. So not only do you not eat them together, but like the amount of time ranges from 2 hours, I think, or in some communities to like 6 hours in others. But interestingly, if you're going the opposite direction, like eating dairy before eating meat, it's a much shorter window. It's usually, I think, about half an hour to 2 hours, depending on, again, where you come from and what your background is.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's way more complicated than it needs to be.
And the fact that you're vegetarian, though, helps you out. It makes it simpler.
Yeah.
It's simpler for you.
It's so much simpler. So yeah. Did you pick up on anything that I missed that I should talk about?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I didn't think so because there wasn't that much in it in this one. So
yep.
Yeah.
90s nostalgia.
I'm gonna start with the first scene. Brighton's playing a Game Boy.
Oh yeah. Good catch.
Thank you. I'll also mention, I mean, we do see some old cars. We definitely see some New York City taxis and buses, but I'm pretty sure they still look the same. So they're probably not 90s nostalgia. And then I guess Fran's comment after Maxwell makes a comment about how he wants to be in a bar with his hands wrapped around a tall lager, and her response about him picking up Paul Bunyan and have you told the kids you're considering an alternate lifestyle? Those comments feel very dated to me.
Yeah. Also, like, opening scene where Maggie's like flipping through a magazine and that's where she finds out about that kissing contest. I already mentioned, I feel like that plot line, first of all, feels dated, but secondly, her source of information.
Oh, fair.
I feel like it would be more social media if there was any type of like contest being, announced rather than like, and I didn't catch which magazine she was looking at, if it was a specific one or not, but
I didn't catch it. I don't think we see.
But then also the record store.
Oh, sorry. That was actually in my notable New Yorkers and I totally missed it. Tower Records. It was an actual international music store. They used to operate a suite of stores located in Greenwich Village and a couple other locations in Manhattan. So they were a real place. Sorry. Totally.
Yeah. But again, that we don't really have that much these days. And again, the Val wanting to take a picture with the cutout of Billy Ray Cyrus instead of just whipping out your cell phone to take it.
Right.
Fran had an actual camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Sean's haircut, we've talked about, that's a very 90s hairstyle, I would say.
Is it?
Yeah. Like
okay.
Kind of more of the there was a period in the 90s where like boys had longer hair. Like
I believe you. I just remember
partly like, okay, like think of like Hanson or even the grunge scene, or like again, I'd have to look up to what extent like it was like Jonathan Taylor Thomas's hair back then. It was longer.
I totally believe you. The only haircut from men or boys that I remember from the 90s was the mushroom cut.
Yeah. Well, and this was kind of like that, but
way longer.
Yes. Again, it looks like Maggie's haircut.
It did. There's no overestimating it.
Yeah. But like, do you know what Kurt Cobain looks like?
No.
From Nirvana?
No.
It like, so for the audience, Maggie's boyfriend Sean kind of has something similar-ish.
Okay. I've Googled him, so now I see what he looks like. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say similar, but like imagine Kurt Cobain's hair being like folded in, so it like, you know, rounds instead of falling flat.
Yeah, and kind of all just a similar length, like not different lengths. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, it's complicated. Basically, if you see a picture of Maggie, Sean's hair looks a lot like Maggie's.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Maggie
minus the bang. Minus the bang.
Right.
Yeah. So, we didn't really see a lot of Gracie this episode, I just realized.
No, she's like only in the first season. First scene. Wow. Yeah. I was like, I know it's not episode. And then I jumped to season. That was clearly wrong.
But yeah. Was anything else kind of sparked from what I said?
Yeah, actually not really 90s nostalgia, but since we make the rules, I'm just going to pop back to Notable New Yorkers briefly. Fran made the comment, I'm not just rock and roll, I'm a little bit country too. I think that's a reference to Donnie Marie Osmond's signature tune, a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll.
Yeah. I kind of thought that as well, but forgot to mention. So good catch.
Thank you. That's my confirmation came from songfacts.com. So I like to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Then you mentioned earlier kiss count is now at 4. And we're not counting like forehead or cheek kisses. We're talking about kisses on the mouth that are such, have so much passion and such abandon and such suction.
Exactly. I will say that just not that this is not future fun. This is actually like looking backwards. If you recall when we did the episode A Star Is Unborn, that's the one where Fran gets cast as Juliet, and Max, she's running lines with Maxwell and he kisses her. She has a much stronger reaction to him kissing her than he has at that point. Like, remember, she like falls down the stairs.
Yeah.
And here she kisses him and he has a much bigger reaction than she has. Like, she, fixes her skirt and says, as you pointed out, like, I'm sorry I had to get rough with you, but you had to learn. And she like walks away and he's just like lying there on the couch, like totally frozen. And there's just a nice symmetry there. I just wanted to point that out because it makes me happy. Okay. I guess future fun. So I'm going to start by saying this is not the last time that Fran and Max will kiss. So everyone hold your horses. It's also not the last time that Cece and Niles kiss. We'll actually see them make out a bit at the very beginning of season 3 in the episode Pen Pal. So something to look forward to. Maxwell and Brighton were playing chess when Fran and Maggie come home from the kissing contest. And that's actually going to be a relatively I don't want to say major, but it's a notable plot point in the episode Dope Diamond, which I think is also in season 3. Brighton actually bonds with Jules, who's Fran's short-term fiance, because Jules lets Brighton win and Maxwell will not do it. I will also mention that this is not the last time we're going to see Maxwell trying to provide Fran reassurance. And her saying, you're wasting your breath. Stop. Oh, go on. You're embarrassing me. Stop. Oh no, keep telling me. I'm not done listening. Most notably, it makes me think of the last episode in season 5, which for those who are familiar with the series, they know it's a big event and they'll know what I'm referring to. But those who have not seen the series before, I don't want to ruin what's happening there. And then the last one I'll mention is a side note that I think I've mentioned this before, but Fran does actually get to meet Barbra Streisand at Barbra Streisand's home in the Hamptons in season 5, an episode called The Car Show. So
awesome.
That's all I got.
Yeah. So we now go to episode rating. As a reminder, we rate the show 1 to 5 lipsticks. But we make the rules so we can always change it. But Debbie, it is your turn to go first this week.
I know it's my turn. I was so excited to go first until you started complaining about the episode. And then I was like, oh no. As you can tell from my voice, I've had a huge smile on my face this whole time we've been talking about it. I like this episode, again, primarily because of Fran and Maxwell and their kiss. And also there's that short exchange that I think you quoted or paraphrased before where, he says, I can't have my nanny, doing something like this. I have a certain standing in the community. And she's like, that's what I am to you, your nanny? And he's like, yes. And she's like, fine, you caught me on a technicality. Like their relationship is clearly developing. And I think it's great. I like this episode more than last week's episode. I'm giving it a 5. And I know you're going to totally disagree with me, but I can live with it.
Yeah, I was critiquing. Yeah. So I think obviously there's fun bits to it, but that does, like, the whole kissing contest plot does take me out of it a bit. If it had been a broader one, not like geared towards teens, and it wasn't like Maggie, but maybe they had done it where Val was wanting to go and Fran tagged along, that would have been better for me personally.
Well, can I ask you just a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
Did we actually know that it was targeted to teens, or that Maggie's friends were just planning to participate? I mean, I guess you're right, because
the manager basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, they all acknowledged that it was geared towards teens, and like, you would think too that if it wasn't geared towards teens, that they would have had like, you must be 18 or older to enter kind of thing.
Okay, fair. Yeah. I tried to save it. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then you're not going to be pleased with this. I'm just going to mention it because this is fiction. It's a rom-com. So like, I think, it's fun for us to see like Fran kissing Maxwell and then Cece kissing Niles. But just as a reminder, dear listeners, consent is still a big thing in real life.
No, that is a good point. I think we see in this show and in a lot of other television we watch that normal, appropriate behavior is thrown out the window for a laugh.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, I acknowledge this is fiction, and I know, there's no ill intent there. But just for the sake of fairness, even though it's women who are initiating the kiss, I mean, consent works both ways. So
that's true.
I was going to mention that. So I really am struggling with a rating.
You can always adjust it later. Although, in fairness, we only have 3 episodes left in season 2. So,
yes, but I can still we'll still have our season 2 wrap up.
Correct.
That's where we typically kind of adjust.
Correct.
Sorry. Because again, there are bits of it where I enjoyed it more than last week, but then I just wish they didn't do the Maggie part of it. For now, I'm just gonna give it a 4, and then we'll see how I feel later about it.
That's higher than I thought you were gonna go, so I'll take it.
Yeah. Again, and listeners may disagree with me, but I just don't like that kissing contest geared towards teens. Anyway,
that's fair.
That's what I got to say to this week.
No, that's fair. And I mean, this is again one of those times where you and I are coming at it very differently. Like, I grew up watching this, so like it was just funny. But now we've obviously had, 27 years of lived experience since the episode originally aired. Yeah. I did the math. I'm not saying how, anyway, and society has in some ways progressed, in some ways we've regressed. And yeah, I mean, you come at it from a different perspective, and I get that. So
that's the whole point of this podcast.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Unless you have anything else.
I do not.
All right. That's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 46, Strange Bedfellows.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can reach us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.